Well, hey everyone, welcome back. Our guest today is Madison Eulberg. She is an electrical engineering major. She is a sophomore here at Oklahoma State. Um, Madison, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. So electrical engineering, what made you pick that?
Engineering in general is just a really broad field. There's a lot of different disciplines within it. I chose electrical specifically just because it is so broad, so you can do a lot of things with it, from tiny microprocessors and your digital electronics that you use every day up to huge lighting systems for large scale projects.
Nice. Do you have a particular affinity to any particular type of project?
I like the larger scale projects, like the physical stuff. I'm not big into the theoretical side of anything.
Mm,
I like to be able to see it and work with it with my hands.
yeah. Do you have a dream of a biggest thing you would want to work on?
I do. Big thing I want to work on would be like in the theme park industry. I'd love to work in a big project like that where you're dealing with a large influx of people in and out every day, just constantly running.
Theme park.
Indeed. Yes.
So, I mean, is that your dream career path then?
It is my dream career path, yeah. Themed
Nice.
entertainment industry.
So how do you get there from here?
You really just kind of got to work your way up. It's a really hard field to start into right off the bat. They really prefer you to just kind of have another job where you can get experience in like the workforce itself and just how those projects are handled. So then they can transition you into, okay, this is the actual project. You're dealing with thousands of people every day. So you just kind of have to work your way up. So it does take some time, but it's a fairly big field.
Yeah, what is the timeline like on that?
Honestly, most people don't get hired in like the theme park industry, the themed entertainment industry, until they're at least like, honestly, the youngest that I've ever heard was like 27, because they want you to just have like as much experience as possible, just because you're dealing with a little bit more like if you're dealing with a roller coaster, you have to make sure that everybody's okay. Like
Right.
you have to all these like safety standards and everything. So they just want you to be a little bit more knowledgeable and know what you're doing.
Yeah. Is that a class or anything that you'll have to take of like those types of safety standards, or is that something you would learn and be trained on the job?
More than likely be trained on the job, just because it'd be more company specific.
Mm,
I mean, there's like national safety standards that you'd have to follow, but each company would have their own like industry preferred standards, if
yeah.
that makes sense.
Right. Even those kind of blanket standards, you would learn those later, or even the national ones you might.
Basic ones now, like as a student, but then more specific as you got more into the field.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. Um, okay, so then your own timeline next 3 to 5 years, what does it look like for you?
Honestly, probably just getting some sort of engineering job. I'm not particular on one or the other. Anything that gives me experience and gets a paycheck. Uh, but then hopefully work my way up to where I could be in the themed entertainment industry. And dream job would be working for Disney.
Disney.
Yes.
Disney World or Disneyland or anything.
Disney Imagineering. So that could put you in land, it could put you in world, it could put you in Hong Kong, Tokyo, Paris, anywhere.
And they'd just move you, right? I mean, is that how that works? Or
Depending on the job title, yeah.
wow, and you wouldn't have much of a say necessarily.
They keep it really, really secretive. So it would
Mm,
depend on what your specific job title is, because if you're more of the design aspect, you could probably stay in the United States more, like in Florida or California, or possibly even working remotely. Or if you were, like, say, if you were more on the construction side of it, like if you were a construction engineer, you would be on the job site. So you would be at whatever location they were physically building that.
gotcha. Okay, so Imagineer though,
Mm-hmm.
is that a pretty broad title?
Yes. So Walt Disney Imagineering, it's just like their fancy word for an engineer. They combine imagination with engineering, obviously. But within Imagineering itself, they've actually got over 150 disciplines. So it's not just engineering, it's architects, it's graphic designers, it's painters, it's welders. Pretty much any field that is like creative, they've got people in it.
Hmm. Uh, how many Imagineers do you think exist in the world?
In the world, oh gosh. I'd say a couple thousand.
Wow.
But that's very broad. There's a lot of people
Yeah.
that do this.
Um, It's funny. Did Walt Disney come up with that term, or is that the term that they applied later, the Imagineering?
I don't know for sure. I'd like to think that it was himself, but I'm not 100% sure.
Because he did a lot of the branding, right? Like a lot of the things that are like I know Epcot. Well, and his vision for Epcot was different, I guess, than the theme park that exists now.
Yes, so Epcot actually stands for Experimental Prototype Community of Tomorrow. So his original vision was for it to be like a living, breathing community where people live, and that's how they stay. And like transportation is this whole big thing. It's like this big utopian society that he envisioned. He died before that happened, so then they turned it into a theme park. But the theme park itself, like Epcot, is geared more towards technology and innovation, so that the dream kind of lives on, but it's much different from the original idea.
Yeah. Did you happen to see in the news in the past few days that Disney announced that they're kind of doing something similar?
The utopian society, I think it's called like Storyline
Yeah.
or something like that.
Yeah. What do you think of that?
I thought it was interesting. I did see on there that it was only designed for people like age 55 plus. So I guess that's their idea of like a retirement home.
Retirement community.
But I mean, heck, I'd live there. I'd retire there.
Do you know anything what do we know about that project? I mean, like they just announced it, right? Like that was just a recent thing.
Yeah, like within the past few days. I don't know that much about it. Honestly, like I don't know enough to give a lot of information other than that they're working on it.
Cuz I would wonder how big it would be. Like what's their vision for how many people they want to live there? And maybe you know this, maybe some of the ideas translate from like the original Epcot vision. But are people working there, or is it just like a retirement community where they pay to live there and that's it?
I have no idea. My best guess is probably just the retirement community, but I genuinely don't know.
Yeah, I saw some concept images. Did you see any, were they official concept images, or were they ones that
I think they were
made?
official, yeah.
They looked kind of interesting.
They looked very interesting.
They had I feel like they had some weird kind of plant-looking architecture, like along some sidewalks or something. And it was very, almost felt like 1960s futuristic look.
They've had similar projects like that in the past. One of like probably the most well-known ones is a town called Celebration, Florida, and it was kind of like, it wasn't an official, but it was basically like company sponsored, and it was this town pretty close to Disney World, within like I think 20 miles. I think it was within like 10 miles actually. It's pretty close. And they kind of had that as their like utopian society type thing. Didn't take off quite as well as they thought. I mean, it's still like a town. It's still there. It still has like, whenever you're walking around, you can see the Disney remnants as far as how the buildings are, like how they look, how like the visual appeal of them. They're very much something that Disney would do. But so yeah, I'm curious to see how this new retirement village turns out. If it's going to be the same way, or if it's going to be more like what they originally wanted Epcot to be. Yeah.
So you mentioned on those buildings, you can just look at them and kind of tell that's something Disney would do. As an Imagineer, right? As an engineer or an architect designing buildings for a Disney project, how do you learn to work kind of under that umbrella? You know what that process would look like?
So it's really project specific. The main goal behind everything that they do is the story, because you're putting on a show. Everything is a show. Everything has a story from start to finish, and you want that audience member, the guests that are coming to these Disney parks, seeing these things, riding these rides, you want them to be as immersed in the story as possible, and you need it to look flawless. I mean, you can't have, something that's painted, like the paint looks shabby, the paint's chipping, because that'll ruin the story. It'll ruin the effect. So whenever they're designing stuff like this, like when they're designing big structures, even up to the small details, they have to just think about the storyline. So, like for example, in Animal Kingdom and Walt Disney World in Florida, one of the rides there is called Expedition Everest. And so they have to keep every single detail, from the floors, the walls, the ceilings, how the place smells, the lighting in it, every single detail about it. They had to think about that and design it to fit the story.
Wow. I've been on that ride, and that's my favorite ride that I've been on at Disney World. And I haven't been on all of them, but that one we rode like 4 times. And I guess, register maybe, but how do they tailor how it smells?
So they actually have in a lot of the ride systems, and even along like big passageways, like in Main Street in Magic Kingdom, whenever you're walking down, they actually have a venting pipe system. And so they'll pump in specific smells that they want you to smell. So, like if when you're walking down Main Street USA and Magic Kingdom, they actually pump in the smell from inside of the confectionery, like the candy that they're making, the baked goods that they're making. They pump it out into the street so that you smell it, so that whenever you're walking down the street, you don't smell like the gross, sweaty people because it's July and it's you're in Florida. You smell the candy and the brownies and the cookies that they're making.
So when each project is being designed and they're thinking about the things like the floor and the smell and the look, is there kind of a individual manager kind of for each of those, or is somebody literally in charge? Okay, we're gonna think of how this thing smells. We're gonna think of how this thing looks. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They kind of break it up like that within project.
They keep it very, very, very secretive. So I don't know a specific answer to that. But I mean, they start working on these projects literally years in advance. So I'd imagine that they have somebody that's specific to everything. I do know that they have, I actually got to speak with an Imagineer a couple years ago. They do have like this catalog, this record book of every single material that they use, what color it is, where they got it, how much it weighs, all these specifications about it. So that if they ever need to replace it, they just thumb through this catalog and say, okay, you know, this fabric that we used on this animatronic character in Splash Mountain, we need more of it because it needs replaced. They know exactly where it's at. So they just keep this massive catalog. So I'm sure that they have those like for the various smells, for the various like textures and materials that they use on every single aspect of the park.
Yeah. Would you want to be on the side that is making new things, or would you be on the side that I imagine exists of people that have to go through and look for things that need to be replaced and keep track of all of that?
Personally, I would rather be on the designing side of it, just to be creating new things, to be imagining new possibilities and like how to create a more immersive experience for the guests. I'd be fine doing either, don't get me wrong, but that would be the one that I would prefer for sure.
Well, can you tell me how you figured out that this is a career that you want to do?
Yeah, so actually, I didn't really know that it existed. I mean, I'm sure that engineers exist in Disney World, but it wasn't like, oh wow, this is like a whole big deal.
Yeah.
This is a big thing that people, they want to do, that this is what their whole life is about. Until actually 2016, my mom and I went to Disney World and we got the chance to have lunch with an Imagineer. And her name was Arissa. We sat down, we had lunch with her for like 2.5 hours, and it was the best experience I've ever had. She just answered so many questions. She gave such great advice. So after that, I was pretty much like, I walked out of the restaurant. I was like, that's what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You grew up with Disney, just movies and shows in your house. What's your favorite Disney movie?
Up.
Why?
I don't know. Honestly, I think that it's probably the memory that's associated with it. My grandma took me to see it whenever I was like 9 years old. So I think that's probably what the memory behind it is. But it's just a sweet story. It's got the romance. It's got comedy. It's got action. I just really like the storyline. I like the aesthetic too, and the music is really good.
It's a pretty widely appealing film, and of course that opening is just about perfect.
Heart-wrenching.
It's so good. But it's interesting to me though that your favorite Disney movie is a Pixar film. I don't know. Do you know how much influence Disney has over Pixar? Because I feel like when I watch like Toy Story, and I don't recall which ones they made before Disney bought them, but I feel like it was like Bug's Life, Toy Story, and maybe Toy Story 2. I don't feel like they feel all that different. So in other words, I feel like Disney bought them, but they don't feel like Disney movies still. You know what I mean? Do you know how much influence Disney has over the Pixar?
I don't know specifically like how much influence that one company has over the other. I know they collaborate a lot. Like they collaborate pretty frequently, not just on movies, but also like things inside of the park because they want to get the details right. They want to get that storyline just right. So I'd imagine that Disney has some influence over it, just like they do Lucasfilm, since they bought that with the
Yeah.
Star Wars franchise and everything like that.
Right, and then the Marvel side too.
Yes, yeah.
In those scenarios, uh, does Disney act more like a distributor than a producer? Because they still make their own movies, of course, like Frozen,
Mm-hmm.
and they produce those ones. But then they buy all these other, and like they own. Do they own is it ESPN or something? Like
Yes, yeah.
they own ESPN.
They own ESPN, and I don't remember if they own or if they're just connected to like the whole ABC network.
Yeah, they're quite a conglomerate. Was that part of Walt Disney's vision? Do you know?
I don't know.
Did he want it to be as big as it is?
My guess is probably no, honestly, because I know like the driving factor, like the determining thing that made him want to build Disney parks was that he wanted a place for the family to be able to spend time together and for everyone to be able to enjoy everything. Because before then, it was just, okay, parents, you sit on a park bench while you watch your kid go on a carousel. And he was like, forget that. I want to be on the carousel with her. I want to do stuff, be a family, be together. So that was the original goal. So I would imagine that he'd be pretty shocked to know that he owns like ESPN and everything. But
Yeah, now they're of course they got the streaming and they own is it National Geographic too at all the nature stuff. They are everywhere and they get bigger every day.
it's true. Yeah. I like to focus a bit more on the Imagineering side of it, not media.
The media, yeah, because that almost gets kind of scary.
Yeah.
But the
A little
parks,
bit. They also recently partnered with Amazon to, they're working on integrating Amazon Alexa into Disney hotels. And so instead of saying, hey Alexa, you would say, hey Disney, what time does Magic Kingdom open today? So that's yet another partnership that they're doing that's interesting, but also kind of strange.
yeah, and that's in the park side.
Yeah.
So essentially, I guess that would every room you'd be able to just say, "Hey Disney."
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And see the thing about that, because I have an Alexa, and they say that it doesn't listen to you at all times, which obviously isn't true because it's listening for you to say Alexa or Hey Disney.
Right.
So they're just gonna be putting microphones in all of the rooms, waiting for you to say Hey Disney.
It's an interesting concept. We'll see how it goes. It's still in the beginning phases. They're just going to start rolling it out and product testing it. But obviously they've been thinking about it for a while if it's got the green light to go forward.
And see, I imagine they'd have to work with Amazon on their like Epcot like society that they're
Right.
because like package delivery. That's kind of scary. Amazon's big.
That's true. I didn't even think about that, but that's true.
These big brands like co-integrating. I want to bring it back though to the engineering side. Sorry, we kind of got off on that, but how often do they actually make new roller coasters?
Honestly, they roll them out. They usually have a new ride about every other year. I know COVID slowed them down a little bit, and it actually canceled a few projects, but they consistently roll stuff out because they're consistently expanding and updating. It's like I know here recently, the most recent ride that they've unveiled that they've released is Remy's Ratatouille Adventure in Epcot, where guests are shrunk down to the size of a rat, and you're going through a kitchen on their new trackless ride. But yeah, so they're pretty consistent. I know right now they're working on a Tron roller coaster in Magic Kingdom. That one's going to be fun.
Oh,
And then they're also working on Guardians of the Galaxy Cosmic Rewind.
nice. Do you know if the Tron one's gonna be based off of the newer Tron or the older Tron? Because they kind of have different looks.
The newer Tron. Like the
Okay, that's
bright
good.
blue lights.
Yeah.
The roller coaster vehicle itself, instead of being in the typical like stationary upright seating position, you're actually going to be on a motorcycle. You're going to be like leaning forward, strapped in,
Oh, that's gonna be so cool.
halfway outside, halfway inside.
Nice. And that Ratatouille one sounded really creative too.
Yeah, they integrated a new trackless ride system. They've only done it on, I think, a grand total of 3 rides so far, at least in the Florida location. I think they've done it in the Paris location too. But they've got a new trackless ride system where basically like your typical roller coaster that's on some sort of steel beam that guides it, or some sort of like divot in the floor that guides the track. They're completely getting rid of it, and they're solely relying on the programming inside of each ride vehicle. So that allows it to move not only forward and backwards, but side to side, diagonally. They can spin you if they want. They can move you all around. It's exciting stuff, because then it also leads to the possibility of, if you're ever replacing this ride, you don't have to rip up all of these tracks. You don't have to fill in the cracks where the divots in the floor were for the ride chain. It's because it's quite literally just a regular floor.
Well, so they just make a track, not a track that it's attached to, but they like a racetrack, more or less, that this car just follows.
Pretty much like an invisible racetrack, yeah.
Wild.
Yeah.
And see, that side of it is wild too, the coding side.
Right. Yeah.
But that Ratatouille ride, that sounds fun. If you had to design your dream project, like what movie would it be from? Because are they almost all from a movie? Are any of them not?
A couple of them aren't from a movie. Some rides actually inspired movies. Haunted Mansion being one of them. Haunted Mansion was a ride way before it was a movie.
Right.
Of course, Jungle Cruise is like one of the newest movies, so that was based off of
Pirates of the Caribbean too, right?
Yes, yeah, Pirates of the Caribbean. But yeah, for me personally, I would want to base one off a movie. I've actually thought about this quite a bit. I would want to build one based off of Emperor's New Groove and put it in Animal Kingdom, and do because they have an Asia section, they have an Africa section. I'd want to do a South America section. It would be Disney, if you're listening, please hire me. If it would be a water ride, and you've seen Emperor's New Groove, yeah, the most iconic scenes where it's like pull the lever, Kronk.
Uh-huh.
Well, that would start out going backwards. Be like, oh no, wrong lever. You shoot forwards, yeah. That'd be the ride. You go through the layer, you go through the jungle. It'd be a good time.
That would be awesome. But is this, you said section? Like this is a whole section of the park?
Right, yeah. So each of the theme parks have different lands, you could call them, different sections that have different themings. So like I mentioned earlier, Animal Kingdom specifically has technically 5 different sections. There's Discovery Island, which has like the Tree of Life, Pandora, which is the world of Avatar, Africa, Asia, and then they actually have Dino Land USA, which is like dinosaur themed.
Where is Galaxy's Edge? Is that its own park?
No, it's connected to Hollywood Studios. So it's a land inside of Hollywood Studios.
Hollywood Studios, I remember I wanted it to be kind of cooler. And it wasn't my favorite. I don't remember it too well. I remember really liking Epcot, and then really liking Animal Kingdom.
Right.
What's your favorite park, though?
My favorite park is Animal Kingdom.
Yeah.
But Hollywood Studios grows every time that I go there. I used to be like you. I used to not like it, but since they added Toy Story Land and Star Wars Galaxy's Edge, it's jumped up quite a bit.
Yeah, I feel like the Star Wars one alone would do it for me. It obviously wasn't there.
Yeah, they've actually thought about renaming the whole park Star Wars. Like they've thought about renaming Hollywood Studios as like Star Wars Land overall. They nixed that idea and just went with the land, but they thought about retheming the entire thing.
How much revenue do the parks bring in? Do you know? Because a lot of it comes from their movies, I'm sure.
Right.
Like a lot of their revenue, but the parks probably do pretty well.
Millions. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why they tried to stay as open as they could even during COVID, and just put up a bunch of restrictions just to get that revenue in, because it's not only the ticket prices that they're getting revenue from, they're also getting revenue from food sales, merchandise sales, and hotel stays as well.
Yeah. Because it was always a little surprising to me that they haven't closed their parks.
Right.
Because their movies do so well, and they have all of the movies, and and you have like Universal Studios, like Universal has a theme park, but most studios don't have anything close to that,
Right,
and so
yeah.
the movies do well enough to keep them open. So I'm always a little surprised that they don't close it, but if they do really well, and yeah, I hadn't even thought about it. It's kind of a marketing thing for the merchandising too, I
Right.
imagine.
Yeah.
Like they're going to sell more merchandising, making it known through the parks than just relying on, oh, people liked our movie, so they're going to go to Walmart and buy the toys.
Right. Yeah. Just like the Star Wars example. Star Wars fans, they're going to buy a ticket so they can go in there and they can build their own custom lightsaber in Disney World. Cost them $200, but if you're a fan, you're going to do it.
What did they have? Because I went when I was like 13 probably.
Mm-hmm.
So 7 years ago. And we made lightsabers. But did they just have a smaller Star Wars section? Is that what it was?
Yeah, it was a much smaller section, which that section is still there today. They just expanded onto it.
Yeah, because it wasn't probably that expensive, but they had a little build your own lightsaber thing. And,
yeah.
we still have those at home. But when did they buy Star Wars? Do you know?
It was definitely before the 7th movie came out.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to say like early 2010. That somewhere in that range.
Yeah. That was a big purchase for them.
Yeah.
I mean, that was.
And they've done exactly what they should as far as like the marketing and stuff, because they've got build your own lightsaber, build your own droid. They've got Star Wars Land. They're building a Star Wars hotel right now that's actually going to be open within the next month.
Ooh.
Yeah.
That'll be really. What's the hotel going to look like?
So it actually won't look like anything special on the outside, but the whole premise is that it's basically like a cruise, but on land. So the name of it is Star Wars, like Galaxy Cruiser, is the name of the hotel. And so the whole story, all back to the story, this whole story behind this hotel is that you're going on a space cruise, and where it's the physical hotel, like in Florida, is just your transport station that will take you up to space to your actual Star Cruiser. Even though you're still here in Florida.
Right.
That's the premise behind. So it looks just like a regular building on the outside. Like it looks like what you would imagine a space portal to look like. But on the inside, it's got all the different decks of the ships. It's got the docking bay, the engineer room, the captain, like the captain's quarters. That's what I'm trying to say. Steering deck, everything like that.
Wild. So when you're applying to work for Disney, is it part of the hiring process or application process that you have to show them that you can tell a story? Because it sounds like that's like such a big chunk of all of these projects is the story, and so do you have to show them that?
I would imagine so. I imagine that'd be a huge part of it, because I mean that's pretty much their driving force behind everything, is to make families immersed in stories.
Yeah. If they asked you like to show them how you could tell a story, how would you go about that?
Oh gosh, I don't know. I think it would depend on how they would ask. Like if they would want like a visual representation of it, as far as like design a ride that tells a story, or if they were just like, oh, tell me a story, then I could just tell them a story. But I think it would depend on what they would want.
Yeah.
I know they're a model-driven company, so like they like physical models. They like to be able to see it before it's in the flesh.
Yeah.
So I'd imagine that'd be a big part of it.
Yeah. When you were able to sit down with that Imagineer a few years ago, what was some advice that they gave you?
Keep applying, keep going. If you want to do it, you do it. The Imagineer that I spoke with got turned away. She got rejected from Disney 3 different times before she actually got the job. But she loves it now.
Yeah.
And every single time she was like, I'm not going to give up. I'm going to keep going. So that was the biggest piece of advice, honestly.
Do they do a hiring round where it's like apply next year, or is it literally just like once they're like, hey, we don't want you, you just apply again? Or
I have no idea.
Yeah.
I have no idea. They're very secretive about that stuff.
What's the point of that? All the secrecy. Like, why does that help keep them, give them an advantage over something like Universal Studios? Or
keeps the magic behind the scenes. It keeps the magic alive.
Yeah.
They don't want people to know what's behind the curtain unless it's necessary for them to know.
That makes sense. Yeah, the Disney, they work hard to keep their image and
Yes.
to keep that. And a lot of what you've described is building and keeping that immersion.
Right. Yeah, they've actually got what they call Mickey's 10 Commandments,
Mhm.
which is like the 10 Commandments of Imagineering, um, which is just a really, really basic summary of like the 10 most important things you have to consider. And number 10 is keep it up, maintain it.
Yeah.
You got to keep your parks clean. Got to keep guests wanting to come back. Because you're not going to, guests aren't going to want to come back if your sidewalk has gum all over it and
Right.
you've got cobwebs on your lights up above. So you just got to keep it up.
Keep it up. Do you know the other 9?
Gosh, I know a few of them off the top of my head, but I have to look up a list to like give you exactly. Honestly, one of the most interesting ones, I believe it's number 4. Create a weenie, which sounds terrible, but stay with me. What they call a weenie is like it's like a visual magnet to help guests orient themselves in the park, the castle, the Tree of Life,
Huh.
the Epcot ball. Because if you're in an unfamiliar place, you're not going to know where the park entrance is, where the exit is. So if you have something that you can look to and like kind of know where you're at, that's always a big draw. So they try to put a weenie in everything that they do as far as like big scale projects.
I hadn't thought of that, but that makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
Why do they call it a weenie?
I have no idea. Terrible name, but
Is that just one of those things that someone just called it that probably decades and decades ago, and
yeah,
then
probably
it
like
just
before
stuck?
it was even like a thing. Yeah.
Yeah. What are the weenies of all the parks then? Because you listed a few, but like, what is Hollywood Studios?
Theirs is kind of weird because they don't have one in the middle. They used to have a big water tower with Mickey ears on it, but they got rid of it whenever they changed from MGM Studios to Hollywood Studios.
Mm.
So now I'd probably say it's the Tower of Terror, but that one's kind of only visible from one side of the park. So that is definitely the park that lacks that big
Gotcha.
iconic thing in the center.
Yeah, well, that makes sense why I don't remember it. But what are the other parks? How many parks do they have?
In World they have 4,
Okay.
and then in Land in California they have 2. Tokyo has 2. All the others have 1.
Gotcha. Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've only been to World. For some reason, I thought it was bigger. For some reason, that we didn't get to all of it, but maybe we did. But yeah, those hotels
Yeah.
are awesome, and
They're incredible.
we stayed at I think it was the Nemo one.
Mm-hmm. Art of
Uh,
Animation.
yeah, I guess it wasn't just Nemo. All of the water features were Nemo themed,
Mm-hmm.
but we stayed in a Cars themed
Yeah.
room. Does any part of you want to be designing anything with the resort part of it?
It wouldn't be my first choice, but I wouldn't complain if I got it
Sure.
either. Because you can still do a lot within the resort itself as far as theming and keeping that story alive. Because not just within the rooms, but also, like you mentioned, the pools, the water features, the light switches, and just every little detail. There's something to do. There's some sort of way to be creative. So there's still, I'd still do that.
Well, I almost feel like the immersion is harder to keep at the resorts.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's like when you're at Disney World, you're at Disney World. You know, you're like
Right.
already ready to be.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's fully immerse ourselves in Disney. But then, on a usual vacation, especially if you were to go to Universal Studios and then go back to your hotel, that's going to be like your break, quote unquote, from
Right.
the Disney. And so to not have that, I feel like that's harder to maintain.
Right. Yeah. It definitely is. They do their best to keep it up though, because like all the employees are called cast members, so it's like again, it's all a show. But they do their best, and here recently they've kind of amped that up, like with the Hey Disney, with the Amazon Alexa, with the use of magic bands that get rid of the hotel key card. You use your magic band, you scan it on your wrist to open up your hotel room door. Of course, like the themed areas, the themed pools, and then here recently they've been working on getting the transportation systems up and running a little bit better and offering more options in the transportation system to kind of keep that magic alive. Like the most recent is a gondola system they call the Skyliner. So it's literally like gondolas. You get in it, you fly high in the sky to get back to your hotel. Right now, it's only connecting, I think, 4 or 5 hotels, but it provides another means of transportation. It kind of keeps that magic a little bit alive whenever you're soaring above a lake in a Chippendale themed gondola car. It's way better than driving in a car or sitting in a bus.
Yeah, the word that comes to mind here is like seamless. Like it's just
Exactly.
like they don't want you to notice any sort of cracks
Right.
in the illusion and just keep going, going, going.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I imagine that makes it more likely for you to come back and to buy stuff
Yep.
and ultimately have a good time. But that profit's of course going to be there. Speaking of Chippendale, did you see the new trailer for the Chippendale movie?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What'd you think of that?
Of course, I'm still probably gonna watch it, but yeah.
Yeah. I came across that on Twitter, so everybody was kind of
Mm-hmm.
flaming that one, but I didn't know they owned that for some reason. I consistently am surprised at what they own. Even when you said MGM Studios a second ago, I was like, oh, they own MGM. What the heck?
Yeah.
So they're big, but it is really cool
Mm-hmm.
to see kind of that Walt Disney story, and you probably know more about it than I do, where he started and then where things are now.
Mm-hmm.
Well, do you know what that was like for him?
I started off in animation. He wanted to work in
Right.
animation. Got rejected a whole bunch. Worked out of a garage. Drawn. Original one was Oswald, and then drew a mouse. Want to name it Mortimer. His wife was like, "That's dumb. Name it Mickey." And he was like, "All right, whatever." Thank goodness for her, because
Yes.
that would suck to have Mortimer Mouse on your clothes and wearing Mortimer Mouse ears.
Right, gentlemen, this is why we need women for sure. Um, but I'd heard was it Walt Disney, where was it maybe Oswald even, where his first character, they were making the cartoons and then they had like no creative control over it, and so that was when he left and he took like this other animator with him, and that's when they got with the Mickey Mouse and the kind of more of those classic characters.
Yeah, I know that he had. They call it like the original Old Men. Is like 9 of them, and they were all animators, and they kind of worked in that same studios, and those are really the original core group that kind of started. They started off as animators, and then the next thing that they brought in was music producers, because music's a huge deal. You hear a song before you see the story.
Yeah, that is interesting, and that makes me think of Fantasia, right? That's the musical one.
Yeah.
And I've never seen it all the way through, but I've seen bits and pieces.
Mm-hmm.
That piece is like, is it kind of just a series of short films almost, and then it's mostly just music in conjunction with the action?
It's pretty much all music. Yeah.
Yeah. What year was that? Do you know?
Oh gosh, I don't know off the top of my head.
That was early.
But it was really early.
Yeah, I don't know. Disney's really cool. The groundbreaking nature of Snow White also, because that was the first feature length animated film, and then they had Beauty and the Beast decades later. That was the first animated film nominated for Best Picture. I think that was before they had the Best Animated Feature category. So I don't know. They put animation on the map quick.
Right.
Because it's
Yeah.
basically as old as film, and so they continue to prove that it's just as valid a form of storytelling.
Yeah, absolutely. And it just keeps changing. It keeps getting better. It's getting more 3D now, not just in animation like on the film, but also in the parks.
Yeah, how's that? What's that? Explain that to me.
So like one of the examples that comes to mind is projection, use of projection. It's like it's a newer field, but just like with animation and film, it's gonna be big. They're pretty much the driving factor in it. They're the ones that are kind of changing it, setting the example. But the use of projection for fireworks shows, for the insides of rides, like one of the newer examples is Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway in Hollywood Studios. They make use of projections inside of the character's head. So like it's like you have the physical animatronic character, but if you were to turn the projector off on the inside, it would just be like a black silhouette.
Huh.
But the projector on the inside is what projects its face onto it from the inside, not the outside, so that if something walks in front of it, it's not going to ruin that effect. It's from the inside, so it's always there.
Wild. Oh, that's so cool.
It's super cool. Yeah.
Oh, and then I also think of the Spider-Man animatronic. You've seen that?
Like the aerial acrobat one?
Yes.
That one is insane. Yeah.
I saw updates for that, or updates on that one, like for years before it's, I guess, is it in use now?
Yeah. They're going to put it in the Avengers campus on Disneyland in California. They actually don't have any Marvel in Disney World because of a deal with Sony and Universal Studios. So that's why it's only in California. But they're going to use that to like fly in the background whenever guests are walking around. You're going to look up and see Spider-Man flying through the air.
Which is so cool.
Yeah, they've been on the research and development for that project for years now.
It's a remarkable piece of technology. The way it just moves,
It literally looks like a human.
It's impressive. And so it's all with them. It's the vision. Like, it's just his vision that continues, and then they're always just kind of looking ahead. And that's the whole premise of Meet the Robinsons, right?
Yes. Keep moving forward.
Keep moving forward. But well, awesome. Any sort of closing thoughts you want to leave us with? Anything that we haven't heard yet that you want to say?
Not really, no.
That's okay. Thank you so much for coming on.
No problem.
Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.